Welcome back, focused learners. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating, highly specific target within the world of corporate sustainability and risk accounting. We're looking at version 3.8, V21, the anti-corruption audit, disclosing production via the CPI. Basically, we're going to demystify the SASB metals and mining disclosure metric known as MM510A2. Now I know, that sounds like a mouthful of alphanumeric soup, but it's actually one of the absolute most critical barometers we have for understanding how companies operate in some of the most complex geopolitical environments on Earth.
So I want you to think about this for a second. How do you genuinely measure a company's exposure to corruption? If you're an analyst, an investor, or an auditor, you can't just take a company's word for it when they say, hey, we promise we're ethical, right? You need hard, quantifiable data. You need a way to measure those invisible, ethical, and geopolitical risks that are just inherently embedded in the extractive sector. And that is exactly the mystery we're going to solve today using the structured approach provided by the SASB standards.
Let's move to our roadmap and see how this builds today. 1. The corruption risk landscape. 2. SASB's business ethics metrics. 3. Unpacking the CPI disclosure. 4. Calculating saleable metric tons. And 5. Contextualizing your risk data.
Let's start with Section 1, the corruption risk landscape. Before we get into the accounting math, we really need to understand the sheer stakes of the extractive sector. Why are we so hyper-focused on corruption in metals and mining compared to, say, software development? Well, in the metals and mining industry, government relations aren't just some nice-to-have PR function. They are absolutely critical to gaining access to mining reserves. Actually getting to these reserves requires heavy, constant, and ongoing interaction with host governments for permits, licenses, and land rights. And because of this structural necessity, the industry faces an inherently high risk of bribery and misconduct. The source material makes it crystal clear. Violations of anti-corruption laws don't just cause reputational damage. They result in massive one-time financial costs, way higher ongoing compliance costs, and potentially the total loss of access to those vital reserves.
Section 2. SASB's business ethics metrics. Now that we've got a handle on those extreme risks, we need to look at the overarching framework used to track and report them, the SASB standards, which fall under the Sustainable Industry Classification System. Just a quick note, as of August 2022, the International Sustainability Standards Board, or ISSB, actually took over responsibility for the SASB standards. Under the IFRS S1 general requirements, entities are required to refer to these exact standards to identify sustainability-related financial risks and opportunities. So what we're discussing here is literally the global stage for how companies report their business ethics.
Okay, let's dive into this. Before a company starts dropping hard numbers, they have to lay out their qualitative governance systems under metric MM510A.1. This is where a company has to describe its management system for preventing corruption throughout its entire value chain. They have to detail their employee awareness programs, internal mechanisms for reporting suspected violations, overarching anti-corruption policies, and how they apply the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, or EITI standard. But, policies on paper are only half the story. We need to see where the shovels are actually hitting the dirt.
Which brings us to Section 3, Unpacking the CPI disclosure.
So, shifting gears from those qualitative policies over to the hard math, metric MMM510A.2 requires the quantitative disclosure of net production in countries holding the 20 lowest rankings in Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index. This isn't just some vague request. It's a highly specific, standardized requirement. The entity has to report its net production from activities located exactly within this predefined scope of high-risk nations. To make sure everybody is graded on the exact same curve, the standard mandates using Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index, or the CPI. This is the legally required baseline for the metric. And the rules are super strict here. An entity must use the most current version of the CPI at the time of reporting. You can't just cherry-pick an older index from 5 years ago just because it magically makes your operational footprint look a little bit better.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the exact wording of the standard itself. It doesn't just say the 20 lowest ranking countries. Nope. It specifically dictates that the 20 lowest numerical ranks must be used to generate the scope. Because multiple countries often tie and share a single numerical rank on the CPI, your reporting scope is almost guaranteed to be significantly more than 20 countries, much to the dismay of compliance officers everywhere, I'm sure. This rule of exceptions is an absolutely crucial detail for any analyst compiling this data. If you only pull 20 countries, your audit is incomplete and, well, non-compliant.
Moving to Section 4, Calculating Saleable Metric Tons.
So how do we actually compile all this? Let's break the audit down into 3 totally practical, chronological steps. First up, you pull the most current CPI and identify every single nation that falls into those 20 lowest numerical ranks, making sure to include all those ties we just talked about. Second, you aggregate your net production from any active operations located within those specific borders. And finally, you convert that data and disclose it strictly in saleable metric tons. Not gross tons of raw earth moved, but the actual finished saleable mineral output.
And this brilliantly illustrates what it looks like in practice. Ultimately, the standard allows and encourages entities to provide a disaggregation of these calculations by mineral or business unit. You'd separate out your saleable tons of aluminum, copper, zinc, iron ore, precious metals, and diamonds. This level of granularity is incredibly vital for investors. Why? Because the supply chain risks and the profit margins for diamonds are vastly different than those for iron ore, even if they happen to be mined in the exact same high-risk country.
And finally, Section 5, contextualizing your risk data.
You know, as anyone who works with data will tell you, a raw number without context can be wildly misleading. And that brings us to the why of this whole reporting process, how we add a little color to the black and white math. The SASB standard isn't just some blind calculator. It explicitly states that entities may discuss operations located in those low-ranking CPI countries if they actually present uniquely low business ethics risks. For instance, maybe a company operates in a country with a terrible national corruption score, but their specific mine is in a highly secure, autonomous zone with incredibly strict, transparent oversight. The standard gives you the space to add that qualitative discussion to prove your specific operations are secure. It basically allows a company to defend its risk mitigation strategies.
So the crucial point here is that this transparency goes both ways. The standard also invites companies to provide a similar discussion for the exact reverse scenario. Operations located in countries that do not fall into the bottom 20 ranks, countries that are generally perceived as safe by the CPI, but that still present unique or unexpectedly high business ethics risks due to maybe local municipal corruption, specific regional conflicts, or weird supply chain anomalies. The ultimate goal of this framework isn't to punish companies for where they operate. It's to force radical transparency about how well they understand and manage their reality.
Which leaves us with this final thought. Whether you're putting together a mining conglomerate's annual report, or you're an investor trying to figure out where to allocate capital, you really have to look past those surface-level sustainability pledges. The SASB EMM 510A.2 metric gives us the exact tool to do that, blending geopolitical data right in with hard production tonnage. So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. How transparent is your supply chain or portfolio, really? Dive into your own data, explore the SASB framework a bit further, and I'll see you in the next explainer.